Okay, looks like it's 4 o'clock and we're raring to go. Hopefully our speaker's there. I'm just waiting for Bevan to come up on the screen. But as you can see, you're on the Curtin Corner webinar. So thank you very much for all those of you who are logging in. My name is John Phillimore. I'm the Executive Director of the John Curtin Institute of Public Policy. And this is our Curtin Corner, which we have on Friday afternoon. If you've never been to Curtin Corner before, welcome. And if you have been here before, welcome back. It's great to have you on board. I just, of course, would like to begin by acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional owners of the lands from which we are hosting today's webinar. And wherever you're watching from, on your behalf, I'd like to pay my respects to traditional owners, past and present. We've been running these Curtin Corners now for, I think, 20 years on a Friday afternoon with speakers from inside and outside the university on a range of topics connected to politics and public policy broadly defined. And we record the sessions and then put them up on our website. So I please urge you to go and look at our past talks if you haven't had a chance to, and encourage your colleagues to do the same. It can take a week or so for the talks to appear, but they do go up eventually. I can assure you that. And in fact, all the ones we've had this year so far are now on our website, including our most recent one, which was on Australia as a Middle Power by Professor Mark Beeson, which was held 2 weeks ago today. And we've got recordings of presentations from the past several years, online and in person. So please take the time to check them out. We do, of course, like to encourage debate and conversation. And so to do that, we invite you later on to ask questions of our speaker using Slido. That's S-L-I-D-O. And it's very easy to use, and it's important to know about Slido today because we are going to do a little bit of interaction at the very beginning of Bevan's talk, where we're going to do a poll, and we're going to get you to actually answer some questions. So that'll be happening very soon into Bevan's presentation. But the way to do that, we will have a QR code for you to look at. But in the meantime, if you want to, you just go to www.slido.com and enter the event code. And our event code is JCIPP. So you just submit a question, or you like somebody else's question, and I'll facilitate the discussion based on the questions. And as I said, today we're doing something a little bit different. And after Bevan introduces himself, we'll do a short poll. You'll answer the questions. We'll have a chat about it, and then it'll be over to Bevan to do the rest of the talk. I just want to check, Bevan, are you there?
Yes, can you see me?
You can, perfect. So you stay there on the screen so everyone knows who you are when I start talking about you, because I'm now going to introduce you. So welcome. So Bevan Warner was appointed as the Ombudsman for Western Australia almost exactly 1 year ago. He's a West Australian with 35 years experience in the public sector in WA and Victoria. After starting his career in the WA public sector, he went on to lead significant reform and expansion of services as General Manager of Legal Aid WA. And he was a general manager there for 11 years. He then moved to Melbourne in 2008 and was Managing Director of Victoria Legal Aid for 10 years. And then for the next 7 years, 2018 to 2025, he was the Chief Executive Officer of Launch Housing in Melbourne, a community housing organisation dedicated to ending homelessness. But he then saw the light and returned to Perth last year to take up his current position as Ombudsman WA on the 9th of June 2025. So that's like a Tuesday this week, 1 year ago. So Bevan, congratulations on your appointment and on celebrating your first year in this very important position. And thank you for volunteering to do a Curtin Corner presentation. I'm going to hand it over to you, but I'll stay on the screen. And in a minute or two, we'll do the Slido poll. We'll do a bit of innovation today, and we'll do your little poll. And then, of course, you'll have your presentation. So over to you to begin with, just to start us off, and then we'll do the poll. Okay?
Thanks for the introduction, John. Have I got the screen? Yeah, thanks for the introduction, John.
Perfect.
I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that wherever you are, we're gathered on Aboriginal land that was never ceded or freely given, and to pay my respects to all Aboriginal people for their continuing care for land and waterways, which of course we all get to walk on and enjoy. John mentioned Slido, that is the QR code. Very keen to start the session with a bit of audience participation. So, John, I'll hand it back to you, and then we'll get cracking.
Sure, thanks. So this is where we all work out how good we are at technology. We old blokes, I'm sure we can work it out, Bevan and I. So what I've asked you to do before, and many of you have done this before, you've asked questions on Slido, so you've probably already got your Slido up and running. If you haven't and you've not gone to the web, you just take a photo of that QR code, and there'll be a little yellow box come up, and you click on that, and that'll take you to the Slido. And on Slido, if you can see on your phone, I've got mine here. Can you see that, Bevan? If you see my phone there, you'll see there's a thing that says Q&A, and there's also a thing that says polls, Polls. So if you click on the thing that says polls, I'm now going to ask you 3 questions, and you're going to have to answer them and enter your answer, and then that'll let Bevan know basically who he's talking to. So I'm going to open the very first question, which is, it's coming up, wait for it. Have you had an interaction with any ombudsman before? So if you're looking at your phone, you should be able to see that. Can you see that, Bevan? I think you've done it as well. So you can answer the question. I've already got 10 answers. It's terrific. I'm putting mine in. I'm sending it in. And once you send your answers in, you can see what the voting is like. So have you had any interaction with any ombudsman before? So I'll just give us a few more seconds. We're already getting quite a few answers. It's terrific. I like this interactive stuff. We might do this in the future a few more times, so it's good. Okay, it looks like we've hit our limit of answers. And for those of you who haven't got Slido up, it gets a bit boring. So let's give the answer. And it's an absolute dead heat, Bevan. Half our people have had an interaction with an ombudsman before and half have not. Okay, so I'm going to stop that poll and now go to my next question, which is, and I'll just start the poll there. Have you had any interaction with Ombudsman WA? It doesn't have to be Bevan, of course, but with Ombudsman WA in the past. So put in your answers there and see what our answers are. People have got the hang of this because I've already got quite a few answers straight away, and it looks like 50-50 yet again. So you've got some people who know about the Ombudsman more generally and about your own office, Bevan, and some people who don't. So that's our end of that poll. Now, our third question, this one's wrong ones. I'll stop that. I've got to get down to my next question. What do you think the Ombudsman WA does? So that question is now going up. And this one, you can answer more than one of these. There's 8 boxes there. You can answer 1, 2, or none of them. Just work your way through them. So the first answer is, first option is investigate complaints about state government authorities and local governments. The next one is investigate complaints about charitable trusts, investigate complaints about electricity, gas and water providers. The fourth was administer the reportable conduct scheme. Then the fifth is review child deaths. The sixth is review family and domestic violence fatalities. The seventh is undertake major investigations into serious or systemic issues. And the eighth one is provide guidance to public authorities to improve their practices. So I'll give you just a minute or so to tick the ones you think that the Ombudsman WA does, and then we'll see how we go. I'm just doing my own answers here just to prove that we're all doing our bit. Right. We've got almost all the answers that we need. I think. And it looks like almost everybody thinks you do the first one. But you can probably see the answers. Can you see the answers there on your screen as well?
I can. Thank you.
So most people think the first one, and then the second one about providing guidance to public authorities, and then the numbers sort of drop as you go down the list of questions there, of options. Investigations into serious issues, complaints about electricity, about 70%, 50% do the reportable conduct scheme, 42% say reviewing child deaths, 38% investigating complaints about trusts, and 33% reviewing family and domestic violence fatalities. So I'm going to stop the quiz there. So it gives you an idea, Bevan, of what people's knowledge is of Ombudsman WA. And just for those of you who are watching, at the end of Bevan's prepared comments, and before we go into the Q&A proper, we've got 2 more questions to ask you, and then we'll be into the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to get off the screen, stop talking, and hand it over to Bevan, who's going to tell you all about the Ombudsman and tell you whether you are correct or on the right path when you answer those questions. Okay, over to you, Bevan.
Thanks, John, and thanks to everyone for making the time to be interested in this topic. It's great to be able to talk about our work. As John remarked in introducing me, through my career in legal aid and in homelessness and community housing, I've been close to power imbalance for many years, and I've seen institutions of government do good, and I've also seen them oppress citizens and their rights. So I'm very proud and pleased to have the opportunity to be the Ombudsman for WA, my home state. I went to Melbourne for 5 years and stayed for 17. It's a wonderful organisation with a great mandate. We do a lot of work with about $15 million and 90 staff, and I'm going to take you through the work that we do and a little bit about our future directions. The title for the conversation today was Lifting the Veil. I think there is a bit of mystery about what the Ombudsman does, and the truthful answer to the poll is we do all of those things. And I'll take you through the history and where we're going. So we do protect rights and we do improve service delivery, but the original jurisdiction of the Ombudsman scheme was some inspired legislation in 1971. The organisation was opened in 1972. It was Premier John Tonkin's initiative. It was the first Ombudsman scheme in Australia, and every state in the Commonwealth has since adopted it. And importantly, the Ombudsman scheme predates a lot of checks and balances that we take for granted now. It predates the Racial Discrimination Act, equal opportunity legislation, privacy legislation. And at its time, the public service was very powerful and almost impenetrable for individual citizens who may have had a grievance. And in looking around the world, the Scandinavian model of an ombudsman, meaning a people's representative, was established really to provide an avenue for individual citizens to make a complaint and have someone take that complaint seriously, and importantly, to have the powers for the public service to have to cooperate. So the original jurisdiction of the Ombudsman scheme, complaint handling, with the standing powers of a Royal Commission, haven't been given to any other agency since, but deemed important to ensure that we got cooperation, and we do get great cooperation because we do have the powers to compel the production of material or evidence or testimony, which we rarely have to use. But the original jurisdiction, complaint handling powers, and a presumption of privacy, secrecy, which maybe we need to demystify and modernise for 2026, and procedural fairness. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Subsequently, we got the power to be the Energy and Water Ombudsman, and that's slightly different in that we have an ability to make monetary determinations where consumers have got a raw deal. And progressively over time, we've added these other functions. We do review all child deaths and have done so for about the last 13 years. And those investigable deaths are really defined as children who have been in contact with child protection authorities 2 years prior to their death. We monitor a lot of police powers. Subsequent to the Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse, we got the first tranche of the Child Safe reform obligation around reportable conduct. We're likely to have the full suite of child safe regulatory functions in an initiative that's working its way through Cabinet and into the Parliament, and subject to legislation, it's been announced that we will be the independent oversight body for all child safe standards. And we also resolve complaints about charitable trusts. So there's a lot of things that we do, but the overarching idea is that we're protecting rights, improving service delivery, and preventing harm. So if you want to see the spread of complaints by public sector organisation, you can see about 12,000 people making contact with us, reduces down to 2,800 odd formal complaints, investigations, and they're spread across public authorities. Common complaint themes. Some people want to be treated well and feel that they haven't been. So there are complaints about poor communication and treatment and complaint management processes themselves. There's also complaints about financial entitlements, the conduct of public officers, and particularly in rental housing and including from within our prison system. A simple example, a public housing tenant levied a charge, was dissatisfied, felt that the charge was inappropriate. They came to us. We talked with the housing authority, asked them about their policies, asked them to review the circumstances of this individual complaint against their policies. They realised they'd made a mistake, and that was probably worth $700 or $800 to that individual. Might not sound a lot of money to some of us on the call, but very significant both in principle and in the monetary settlement for that particular public housing tenant. A different example, but not dissimilar. Pensioner, vulnerable, believed they were overcharged in relation to rates. They were in fact overcharged, and the problem was a weakness in the systems around applying a pensioner discount. So the value in that individual complaint was the relevant local government improved its practices for everyone else. So that's an example of working in the system to work on the system, or using an individual complaint to have a systemic or thematic benefit for others. The Energy and Water Ombudsman is an industry-funded scheme, so our energy and water utilities pay for the scheme. There's an independent consumer and industry-led board, and we operate on about $2.5 million, and we receive about 1,600 complaints spread across gas, water, and electricity. The sort of common complaints we get, yes billing, interrupted supply, power or water, brown water damage through maintenance failures in sewage systems, customer service and debts and damage. So they're pretty important to have someone impartial but able to bring these large utilities to the table to deal with the power imbalance and to actually get to the heart of the matter. And these are the sort of remedies that we can produce. There are often goodwill payments, and where we've determined that something really egregious has happened under the scheme that is government-backed, but industry supported, we can make a monetary determination of up to $50,000 to settle a particular issue. But there are a range of other remedies there that are set out on the slide in front of you. So in the last 15 years, we've progressively taken up more of the child safe space. It started with what was a Child Death Review Committee, which was a voluntary group that came out of the community, ended up being legislated as a function of the Ombudsman. So we have been undertaking a reflective practice process with government agencies who have or should have been involved in the life of a child where that child has died and there's been formal notification or contact with the Department of Child Protection 2 years prior to their death. That is very sobering work, but the purpose of that work is to look for system gaps and to help organisations to tighten up practice and procedure to prevent harm and to prevent future deaths. Building on that work, we were entrusted, again with legislative amendments to the scheme, to administer the reportable conduct scheme, which requires employers to notify us where there are allegations of child-related harm, and we monitor and supervise the actions that they take in relation to those notifications. As I mentioned earlier, that will be added to, subject to the parliamentary process, with the assumption of a child-safe regulatory function for the Ombudsman, which importantly takes our function away from just looking at the performance of public agencies to supporting through education awareness raising, but also with enforcement powers, the conduct of up to 30,000 entities around the state, including public authorities, but also private for-profit and non-profit entities, including very small organisations, a dance class, an organisation that's doing school camps. So we will be interacting with many thousand small businesses, large organisations, to support and enforce child-safe practices throughout the state. So from the original jurisdiction in 1972, you can see it's expanded to include an industry-funded monetary determination energy and water ombudsman scheme, and now we're central to child-safe practice and reflective practice around preventable deaths in Western Australia. I've mentioned the reportable conduct scheme, and coming back to 1972, the original jurisdiction, complaint handling. The Act was quite inspired in 1971-72. We don't need a complaint to mount a thematic investigation. So if we come across or have a reasonable belief, or there's evidence presented to us about an issue affecting more than one government department, or a significant issue affecting a single government department, through our own motion, we can mount an investigation and use our powers to compel materials to conduct an investigation and then report to Parliament. So I call this the canary in the mine power. The canary in the mine power. We, by looking at what's going on through our individual complaints, by being open to feedback from members of the community, we can construct an investigation, afford all the parties procedural fairness. So if we find fault with something that they're doing, an opportunity for them to respond before we finalise a report and make recommendations to the Parliament. And in this last example, tabled in March this year, was a 16-month investigation into the performance of family and domestic violence response teams, which is effectively the initial police and Department of Communities response to an incident where a police call-out has come because of a violent incident. And it was an investigation into 400 families' interactions with that important family and domestic violence response service, our first level service in Western Australia. In the month of November in 2024, became 388 families that we thoroughly investigated. And we reported to Parliament in March this year. And in essence, what we said, there are significant failings in the conduct of those family and domestic violence response teams, which is a risk to victim safety, because the risk assessments that were meant to be conducted by police in the first instance require a number of questions to be asked, information gathered to inform threat assessments and subsequent wraparound supports for victims to prevent future acts of harm. And in the practice of those risk assessments and in the collection of the data, the availability of those threat assessments to others, the system couldn't be relied upon. For instance, I think by recall, in less than 40% of occasions where it was mandated, the question about whether the perpetrator had access to a firearm wasn't being asked. And what that meant was that upstream, the agencies that needed to react to these threat assessments had incomplete information, and people who should have got a support response sometimes went without, and that left those victims open to more acts of violence than that ought to have been prevented had the risk assessment process been quality assured to a high standard and was reliable. We found that it wasn't, and that scrutiny has provoked both the police and the Department of Communities to recommit to quality practice in that area. So that's the most recent example of us using our own motion powers to tackle an issue that we had seen in our fatality review work over many years, and to construct a review and an investigation that perhaps wasn't immediately welcome, but in conducting the review and engaging with police and engaging with communities and formulating constructive recommendations has now been positively embraced and means that we've got a corrective benefit in a strengthening of our family and domestic violence response team's performance. And importantly, we'll continue to monitor the implementation of those recommendations to ensure that the benefits we all want to see are in fact realised. Another example which has a different pedigree is our review of the Protected Entertainment Precinct scheme. I can't talk much about what we've found because the report is with the Minister. It will be tabled as soon as practicable in the Parliament. It has a different pedigree because unlike the earlier report, which we initiated off our own motion, in this instance, when passing this legislation 4 years ago, the Parliament understood that there were rights infringements and hardwired into that legislation the requirement for the Ombudsman to conduct a review 3 years after the scheme had been operating. So this is an example of the Parliament seeing a use for an independent authority to scrutinise the performance of public agencies, particularly in the instance where rights were being interfered with. And effectively, the key issue here is people's freedom of movement is restricted by virtue of the scheme. The scheme is designed to improve safety in entertainment precincts, and it arose because of a tragic one-punch death. And the scheme requires certain people who have committed serious offences in public places to be automatically excluded for 5 years from these precincts with no right of review. In the last 3 years, there's been a relatively small number of those people, about 50. Perhaps there should have been a few more. But the other limb in the scheme is the use of short-term exclusion orders, which is a police power to exclude people for up to 6 months from these areas. And police have, in the review period, issued about 740 of those. And in the last year, the rate of their use has started to increase. So I think in the last 12 months, they excluded something like 350 people from either Fremantle, Hillary's, Mandurah, Northbridge or Scarborough. And we were required to assess whether the objects of the legislation or the administration of the scheme is going well, and also the scheme's impact on particularly affected groups. So without talking about the report in any more detail, given it hasn't been tabled in Parliament, what I can say is that we have found weaknesses. We have found that the spirit and intent of the legislation is not always being realised, because there are permitted reasons for people to visit these entertainment areas, even if they have been subject to an exclusion order. And there is over-policing of Aboriginal people, or they're certainly disproportionately represented in the orders that have been issued. And there are recommendations have been made, and recommendations have been accepted, and when that's tabled, that will come into full public view. The point I'm making is, in this instance, it's only the independent authority that can use its powers to cooperate and impartially engage and then advise the Parliament that can do this sort of work. So I think the role of the Ombudsman needs to be understood for its corrective benefit in improving public administration and rights and fairness and outcomes for individual citizens. So we've been around for a long time, and I'm not sure whether you can see the detail. There's a bit of busyness on that slide, but we've got a fresh plan for the next few years. What we're really saying there is that we are attaching ourselves to our values of integrity, service, excellence, and progress. Our purpose is to provide fair and independent oversight that helps people to be heard, that improves services, and also promotes the safety of vulnerable people. We've got 5 goals and 12 focus areas. We've got 4 measures that we're committing to. Particularly just want to mention 2 of our goals, insights for change and strengthening our standing. So it's very important from our point of view that our good work isn't hidden under a rock and that it actually informs better practice. So it is important that our oversight keeps children and families safe, and it does result in fairer and better public services. And to do that, we need to strengthen our standing. We need to communicate what we're doing with these resources and in the community's name. So we want to be widely known, trusted, and called upon when needed. And that's one reason why I'm happy to be talking to you today. Talk a little bit about a couple of focus areas. The first, about engaging and providing fair access for underrepresented groups, is a real equity issue. Some people from migrant communities who may be distrustful of government may not know that we exist, or if we did, could confuse us as a creature of government. We're not. I'm an independent officer of the Parliament. I don't report to a minister. We're statutorily independent, and we want people to trust that we can handle their complaint and that they will be safe if they complain to us. And we also need to reach out and overcome any barriers, particularly with Aboriginal people who, again, have often been let down in their experience of working with government, to ensure that we can meet them where they are and that we can take their complaints, and that we are not simply available for people who are computer literate or who may know that we already exist. So targeting our services to reach underrepresented groups is a commitment to equity. We do want to strengthen engagement with the parliamentary process and with public sector stakeholders. People need to want to engage with us and take our work and our recommendations seriously. And we're going to do that by publishing more best practice guides and being more available through all media platforms. We launched a new website last week, and you'll see some of these materials that I'm referring to on our website from next week. But importantly, we're publishing major standards for all of our major investigations. So we're committing to ourselves to a certain methodology. And we're also publishing a guide on the public administration issues we plan to address. So we aim to be very transparent and tell people in advance the issues that we're concerned about and likely to inquire into, and to build a social license or a community of interest in us actually, yes, we should be tackling that work. We're also implementing our new child safeguarding function, which is we expect will be operational in 18 months, and we'll be expanding our energy and water service to alternative electricity services. So people in strata companies, in different forms of electricity supply is changing, and so we'll be opening up our service to a different range of consumers. Success is important. Measuring is more important. It's no good believing we're doing something if we can't evidence it. This is all a commitment to good quality data, quantitative and qualitative, and you'll see more about what those results look like and those measures in the next 12 months. Just want to end by talking about our new investigation standards. So these do provide a transparent explanation of our approach to the exercise of discretion. So in having the standing powers of a Royal Commission, the ability to initiate our own inquiry into any matter that we see fit, it's important that the use of that discretion isn't the idiosyncratic choice of whoever happens to be the Ombudsman at the time. So we are committing in writing to setting out both our approach to the use of discretion in topic selection and also the methods that we would apply in conducting an investigation. You'll be able to find those on our website at the middle of next week. A couple of the ideas. Limited resources mean we need to go and understand the significance of the issue. Does it have a wide impact for a large number of people or a deep impact for a few? Is it feasible for us, or is there some other body who would be better to do that work? Where do we see the potential benefit from an investigation occurring? And in our assessment of the challenges that public administrators have, we're proposing, or we're declaring through these standards, that we will always inquire into the risk guidance that public administrators have been provided by higher authorities, by Directors General or the like. We'll also always be inquiring into the success criteria. Senior managers have difficulty delivering to specification if they don't know what success looks like. And where we believe that proper scrutiny in our investigations about, well, what does success look like, can shine a light on that challenge that we know exists throughout the public sector. WA is the largest state, the most heavily urbanised state. It produces real challenges for rural and regional communities and also for government organisations trying to deliver some comparable service outside the metropolitan area. So as a matter of form, we will always try and contrast the service offer or the service reality between metropolitan and non-metropolitan WA in any of our investigations. And fourthly, this is remarked upon by academics, by politicians, by senior public administrators. It's often the case that an important funded outcome that government wants, or something that is really important for us, for the community, requires more than one government agency to collaborate or to cooperate. We call that joined up service provision. And whilst that's true, the raw accountability structures around sometimes legislation or a single point of accountability or how money flows to a particular initiative doesn't always support collaboration. So there's a tension between single line accountability and an acknowledgement that collaboration is very important. And so as a matter of form, we're saying we will always try to establish through an investigation whether or not collaboration or joined up service provision is actually occurring. If not, why not? If not, is that getting in the way of what we want to see as the actual impact for the community? So by setting out these standards and the criteria around which we're going to choose topics and the questions we're going to ask, we're preparing the public sector for a constructive engagement, and hopefully as we do our work in the future, our recommendations will be not only useful for the organisation we're investigating, but useful across the board for the entire public sector. We will be proposing what those topics are by the end of this calendar year. Again, that's an intention to lift the veil, be less mysterious, declare in advance the sorts of issues that we're going to be inquiring into. We can take feedback. It'll be an opportunity to engage more broadly beyond the public sector. And if people see in year 2 or year 3 that we're going to be inquiring into something, maybe that'll give them time to get their house in order, and that's a good thing as well. So next week we'll be launching a new Instagram channel. We're already on Facebook, on LinkedIn. All of these platforms are a way for us to engage the community and with you, and looking forward to answering any of your questions. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Bevan. That was really good. You're already getting lots of questions coming in, which is terrific. So just reminding everybody that to go to Slido, so slido.com, or alternatively, you get that QR code we had before. So anyway, go to slido.com and that will get you to us. And we're just going to finish off, because it was so much fun at the beginning of the talk, to do 2 more questions on a poll, just again to give Bevan some idea more of what people are thinking about the Ombudsman. So I'm going to start. So if you, once again, go to your Slido on your phone or wherever, and there's a Q&A section and there's a poll section. So go to the poll section. I'm going to open up a new poll. There's only 2 questions. So here's the first question. So does the range of work we do, we the Ombudsman, do surprise you, or is it in line with your expectations? So there's only 2 answers, surprised or expected. So I'm going to click surprised, because a couple of those things I didn't realise the Ombudsman did. So we're getting a few answers. Oh, by the way, the code to get in is JCIPP. So you go to slido.com, and when you get there, it's JCIPP is the code, and then you get into our Slido. So we've got, I'll send my answer. We're getting quite a few. So 74% of people are surprised, Bevan, and 25% of people expected what you do. So the people who said they expected it are probably the ones who actually work for you. So there's a few of them online. So that's great, guys. So good to hear. So we're learning things that we didn't know before. So that's a good sign. So then now our last question on the multiple choice. I'll just start that now, which is on the poll. How do you feel about the focus of earning trust through transparency, which is what Bevan was talking about towards the end of his remarks about letting people know where the Ombudsman's going in terms of what inquiries people are going to have, etc. So is earning trust through transparency essential, important, relevant, or you're unsure? So answer that question and we'll see how we go. And unsurprisingly, 81% of people think it's essential and 19% of people think it's important. So Bevan, it sounds like you're on the right pathway. So well done. So we'll stop that polling for now. And now people who are on the screen, on the Slido, go back to Q&A. You'll see there's already 11 questions. So keep on getting those questions in and I'll start asking you some questions. So Bevan, don't you need to worry about looking at it. I'll just ask you the questions and we can just have a good chat. So Mike asks the question. I think Mike got his question in right up front. So well done, Mike. How do auditors, and I assume also Ombudsman as well, either keep ahead of or keep up with current practice? Mike's a bit worried you might just reinforce current practice rather than helping to move to best practice. So you're maybe in some respects, are you backward looking or forward looking? So that's one of the issues.
Well, good question. Thank you. It comes down to the if it's a major review, it's in advance, and you'll see this in the investigation standards next week. It's the bespoke methodology for each subject matter. We want to define the questions in advance that we want to test. We want to make sure we've got relevant data sources and looking further afield than the end of our nose about what best practices would be an important part of the sort of an initiation of any particular project. So we would have a standard in mind through the research that we do once we've sort of put that proposed topic through the first gateway approval process.
Okay. David Carr, great friend of Curtin Corner, a regular attendee and also a presenter once, asks, how effective is the Ombudsman Office when dealing with politicians' practices? I mean, we obviously hear about the CCC, of course. I mean, does the Ombudsman have any role with politicians at all?
We don't. We don't. They're out of scope for us. There's a few areas that are out of scope for us, courts, for instance, politicians. But we do report directly to the Parliament. There is good engagement with the Parliament. Parliament has a Legislative Council Standing Committee on Public Administration. We engage with them. So I think it's important for the recent report we did into family and domestic violence response teams. there was keen interest across the Parliament for what it is that we were saying. I think they can see that police have a difficult job. Either the prevalence of family violence or the seriousness of it. It's a large part of policing, and we're able to sort of be unbiased truth tellers and sort of lay out our methodology and say, well, yes, it's a difficult job, and yes, maybe it's consuming a lot of resources, but if you don't get it right at the very beginning, the downstream consequences for not having accurate threat assessments means that people aren't being made safe when they should be. So if that's the system, get it right at the beginning, and our ability to be a truth teller in that place, I think is a very important part about the Ombudsman's role.
So just two quick follow-ups to that. I think where David was coming from was, if a person in the public wants to complain about a politician beyond just going to the media, where does that one go? Is it basically a politician? Of course, it could be a politician as in a member of parliament or as in a minister. Do you make complaints to the CCC if you think it's corrupt or incorrect or behaviour that's not improper? Is that the way?
Well, we do run a public interest disclosure scheme, so people would make a public interest disclosure to us, and depending upon what it is, we decide what to do with it, but probably involve the CCC.
Yeah. And public interest disclosure, that's the fancy word for whistleblower, correct?
Yes.
Right. So you're the people in charge of whistleblowers, if you like.
Well, there are a number of organisations that can receive public interest disclosures, and we're one of them. Right.
Important. That's good to know. And then just going back, you said how the Parliament's very involved. You mentioned before that you're not an officer. I mean, you don't really. Well, you said you had a minister, but then you said really you report to the Parliament. So this is a tough question, maybe. Who appoints you? And how does one get appointed? Is your boss, in inverted commas, the Parliament or a minister?
So the governor appoints me on the recommendation of the Premier through Cabinet. There's a public advertisement process run by the Public Sector Commissioner, but my status is an independent officer of the Parliament, and I don't report to a minister. I need to cooperate with government processes around resourcing. We comply with all of the government accountability arrangements around annual reports and etc. But in terms of being able to be directed, I can't be. And in terms of being a servant of government, where I'm obliged to help implement the government's policy priorities, the government of the day's policy priorities, well, no, that's not me. I'm an independent officer of the Parliament, and I'm answerable only to the Parliament.
Okay, I had a question from, as you were talking, which it sort of relates a little bit to some of the other questions that are coming through, and you did mention them a bit. How do you determine the division of labour between what your office does and issue specific complaints officers, like in health or housing? For example, we had a talk about a month ago from the head of HADSCO, the Health and Disability Services Complaints Office. So how do you, when do you look at things, and when does HADSCO? And you mentioned housing before. I would have thought the Housing Authority would have its own complaints avenue, for example. So how do you work out the division of labour?
Yeah, so there's two questions there. There are carve-outs. We wouldn't do HADSCO's work. They're dealing with complaints about physiotherapists or particular clinicians. But every government organisation should have a complaints handling process, and part of our methodology would be, when complainants come to us, have you been through the complaints handling process of the Housing Authority first? If not, do that. Come back to us if you're still dissatisfied, and then we will take it up. So we're a check on and quality assuring tier one complaints handling that should be occurring in every government organisation.
So you're not the first port of call, but often you're the second or third. If the people are not satisfied, they think that the department might be, covering up, looking after themselves, or not doing a thorough job, then they can come to you.
Sure, but they could come to us directly, and part of our case management process would be to help them to be confident to make a complaint through the department's complaint handling process, and we would stay in touch with them. If they weren't satisfied, then we could help them to ventilate it again.
Sure. Okay. That's a good answer. Thanks. Someone asks, again, just trying to work out what the scope of your organisation is. Could you, for example, decide to look into government carbon emissions, or do you need somebody to actually complain? So you're saying you have own motion investigation powers. I mean, do you ever look into policy type issues like government carbon emissions, for example, or broader policy issues, or do you only look in particular at administrative processes type issues?
So the answer is yes and no. We're confined to public administration, but administration can't be totally separated from the policy intention of the funding that's been given to public administrators to use. So the purpose of the program, which someone is administrating, is something that we could examine. So if there were a program designed to abate climate emissions, we could inquire into whether that program is being administered well. Does that make sense?
Sure. Okay. So you wouldn't be querying the intent of the program as a policy issue, as a policy determination by government, but you could look and see whether or not they're administering it well, badly, in good faith, etc.
Whether it's achieving its intended results.
And how does that differ? Sorry, maybe this is a nerdy sort of public servant sort of in discussion here, but how does that differ from the Auditor General? Because the Auditor General does some of their audits are, they've obviously got financial auditing, but they also sometimes do performance auditing. So is there a line between that, those and you?
Well, there are parallels under accounting standards and the way the Auditor General goes about that work. There's a certain style of performance examination around efficiency and effectiveness. We're not limited to that, and they are excellent. That is excellent work that is undertaken by the Auditor General. We can do similar work through different enabling legislation.
Okay, now you lived in Victoria for however many years it was, 17 years or something. The Victorian Ombudsman was a very high-profile figure. I mean, there's no reason why would somebody in Western Australia know about the Victorian Ombudsman, but over the years, at various times, the Victorian Ombudsman's been a very high-profile figure and often seen as a key critic of the government there. So, I mean, is that possible here, or is their legislation different, or what is it about Victoria? I mean, I could think of at least two ombudsmen who, I remember under the Kennett government, the ombudsman was seen as a major critic and the government was very upset about them, a Liberal government. But then under the Labor government in Victoria, the most recent ombudsman was also very critical. So, they were even-handed in being criticised by governments. So what's going on there? Is it just a luck of the draw, or is there something different about Victoria compared to here?
Oh, well, I lived there for 17 years and I know some of the people you're talking about. There is something quite different about Victoria, but can I say that I think one of the most vital ingredients of the Ombudsman is the requirement to actually be and to be seen to be impartial. So it's not a question of not being a critic of government. I'll give you the example of the Family and Domestic Violence Response Report. Our review was not a review of the performance of the government. It wasn't a review of the performance of the minister. It was a review into the performance of police and Department of Community staff at the front line in how they were doing their work. It was a review of police and the Department of Communities. So our recommendations and our advice need to be seen as non-partisan, impartial, available to the government of the day, but also available to the Parliament to scrutinise the performance of the government of the day and agencies that are accountable to ministers. But we are never critiquing government. We are looking at the performance of public administrators in government department land. And I think that's what we should be doing, and that's what I intend to do.
So were the Victorians sort of stepping outside their lane, or were there insufficient other agencies to do that work?
Well, their legislation is different.
Right.
For instance, they conducted a review into the use of staffers in electorate offices, for instance. Their legislation enabled them to do that. And I think it's important that every ombudsman is unafraid to speak clearly and communicate directly to the community as well as to the Parliament. So I think an ombudsman has to be brave and clear, but equally it's very important to be non-partisan, impartial, and for people to understand that we're looking at the performance of hard-working, well-intentioned public administrators who have sometimes got really challenging jobs, maybe insufficient resources, maybe they don't have the appropriate amount of risk guidance, maybe no one's really told them what success looks like, and sometimes that is getting in the way of optimum performance. So we're focusing on the management class, not the political class.
Sure, that's a good answer. And in fact, that example you just gave of what the Victorian Ombudsman did, I mean, a similar inquiry was done in Western Australia, but it was done by a different agency. It was done by the CCC, looking at electorate officers in Western Australia. So it could just be, as you said, the legislation there is more permissive and expansive compared to what it is here in Western Australia. We've got clearer lines of accountability here. Andrew asks, how do you triage matters brought to your office? You did talk about this maybe a little bit towards the end of your comments. I mean, do you have guidance indicating what you realistically will and won't be able to investigate due to resource constraints, for example?
So yes, we have resource constraints. We had a 20% increase in complaints received last year. That's a challenge. We didn't have a 20% increase in resources. Some of that is community being frustrated, I think, cost of living pressures, some of it is being supported by AI. It's easier to make a complaint. Maybe your phone is listening to you. Some complaints we're getting are pre-populated and look very legalistic. Sometimes they're harder to resolve because people are very attached to their grievance because AI's helped them create a lovely, a very legitimate sounding complaint, and we have to put a lot of time and effort into it. In terms of the triage or the sifting, if you like, we look for vulnerability indicators, but everyone will get their complaint looked at. What we're trying to ensure is that we don't have a long tail where it's taking too long for us to get to things. So essentially, it's a vulnerability indicator. What is the consequence for the individual? Where are they at that particular moment? That might get them a bit more swifter attention.
And also, as you said towards the end of your prepared remarks, I mean, you'll be letting people know by the end of this year what your priorities are. So you are it's not like it's just open slather or first come first serve. So you do have you've got priorities there, and people will know about them.
Those priorities will be for our major investigations. Anybody who's got a problem with a government department can come to us through the website or through our call centre, and we will handle their complaint and move it forward depending upon what it is. Sure.
And then a nice follow-up question from someone else was, do you have a policy in place for dealing with vexatious complainants? Because and that can be both vexatious or people who are now, as you said, using AI and just sort of clogging up the system.
We have a second pair of eyes look at it. So essentially, vexatious people who are there are people who are very frustrated with government and can be frustrated with us no matter what you do. So basically, our approach is to make sure that there's a senior officer, a second pair of eyes looking at something. Sometimes we have to put some barriers in the way of future contacts, really, for psychological safety of staff. But we take that we're the complaint body of last resort. So excluding somebody from coming to us is sort of a very serious issue that we would have to take, be very cautious about.
Sure. This might be from the same person who asked the question before about the carbon emissions, because they just said, you're a public sector entity. Are you subject to the 80% carbon reduction target? And how are you doing?
I don't know, but I'll go and find out. It hasn't been something that I've been focused on.
Sure. Okay. Sarah asks, do you see the role of energy ombudsman contributing to efforts to protecting the environment and First Nations self-determination and access to waters and land? So, I mean, I don't know, is the energy ombudsman, you said, is a subset of your office? Is that correct?
The energy and water ombudsman doesn't sit in our legislation. So I don't have the same powers to freelance or to give personal expression to how I might take up that role. The Energy and Water Ombudsman function is defined through some other pieces of legislation where effectively there's a charter and a contract for us to deliver services to a certain specification, and it's consumer based. So short answer would be no, not because I'm philosophically disinterested, because I don't have the same freedom of expression around the Energy and Water Ombudsman scheme, because it's a contract for services that I'm delivering that someone else has specified for us.
Sure. Speaking about consumer interaction, Sunny asks, hi Sunny, also a great friend of Curtin Corner, do you interact with Choice, which I see Australian Consumers Association, Choice Magazine, and those sort of things?
I used to quite a lot in a former life in legal aid, but I haven't in the last 12 months.
Okay. And I had a question, because you mentioned you investigate child deaths. How are child deaths defined? Is it under 18? Is that right? Or are you looking more at younger children, or how do you choose which ones to look at?
Yes, it's the investigable deaths are defined in the legislation. Yes, to the age barrier, and it's the 2 years prior contact with the Department of Child Protection is really the trigger, because there's been some notification of threats or risks to children, and there's either been government action or inaction by a range of government organisations, education, health, child protection, and we would go back in time, seek all of those case materials to see whether anything could have been done that should have been done and wasn't, and use that engagement to sort of reflect back with those organisations to improve their practices.
How do you stop or avoid treading on the toes of each other? I mean, I had the coroner give it at Curtin Corner a few years ago. I mean, you often hear about the coroner doing an investigation into tragic deaths. I mean, we know about the ones most recently. And they'll often make recommendations as to who should do what. How do you work out when? I mean, do you go straight in to do the investigations? Do you wait for the law to take its course first and then go in to do the public administration stuff? How do you sort of separate out what the Ombudsman does versus some of these other agencies?
Great question. The common sense answer is we don't trip over them because we talk to them. So where the coroner does initiate an inquest into a child death, and they did in relation to a child death in prison, we let them do that work. They're better placed to do it. So often the coroner will be aware that we've done work, and it can be the case that we will share materials. So complementary roles, different, coming from different places. The coroner can ultimately find fault. Our process works because we don't constitute any threat to any public servant who's trying to do their job as best they can. We work in a reflective practice framework, but we use our coercive powers to insist on having access to every bit of information we need. So we can see what was done over a period of time, sometimes years, and we can see what was not done, and we're reflecting that back to chief practitioners and people who want to have good practice and say, well, look, it looks like something over here didn't quite work. That's something for you to tighten up, and then they'll commit to recommendations and we'll monitor those recommendations. So we're coming at it from a very different angle. We don't overlap.
Okay, great. Okay, last couple of questions. Louise Lamont from Phoenix asks, or notes that the Australian longitudinal study found that suicide for survivors of child sexual abuse is very high compared to the general population. So does the Ombudsman investigate child sexual abuse deaths? I guess deaths the answer might be yes, but child sexual abuse cases might be no?
Not as a separate category, but the ingredients of a child's life that cause them to be at risk or notified to the authorities, or what we might discover in conducting a child death review may reveal those allegations or those that harm that's been perpetrated to those children. In relation to suicides generally, I think our work in the fatality review space, we also review deaths that occur in the context of family violence. Our March report that I referred to also included a section around 237 deaths that occurred in the context of family violence over the last 10 years that we've reviewed. And there is a strong case to recognise that some deaths that occur in the context of family violence will be by suicide, not by an intimate partner perpetrating an act of violence. So how we steer into that space and over what time period and what resources that might consume, I think is an important question.
Thanks. And last question, I did mention before about this to some extent. So do you, the Ombudsman's Office, have a role in supporting whistleblowers more generally, or is it only in specific cases?
We can receive public interest disclosures, and people can approach us and be confident that their disclosure will be handled in accordance with the law. Okay.
Well, look, Bevan, you've done a great job. We've got to 5:05 and we're just about run out of our questions. And you've answered all of them. They were excellent. And I loved doing the polling at the beginning and at the end. That was a nice innovation for me. So thank you very much for suggesting that. It's been very informative. You got a great job, tough job. I mean, your organisation has to deal with some pretty tricky issues. And so we're really pleased that you're the person in charge of making it happen. And good luck with doing it. And we'll hopefully keep in touch over the years. So thanks very much for your presentation today.
Thanks for having me, John.
Okay, and just for everybody else there who's still watching, we're just going to take a break, Curtin Corner, for about a month or so because it's semester break at Curtin University. We'll be back towards the end of July, but in the meantime, as I've mentioned before, you can get your Curtin Corner fix by watching past events that you might have missed. Just go to our website. Bevan's talk will be up in a little while, so if you know somebody who would like to have seen it but couldn't, just hang around, and in probably about a week or so's time, that'll be up on the website as well. So while you're watching your Curtin Corners over the next few weeks, you won't miss us. So until our next event, we'll be in about probably 6 weeks' time. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. Thank you again to Bevan. Have a good night, everybody. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you at a future event. Thanks very much.